Alright guys, good to see you. So, in today's video, we're going to be talking about the fastest ways to ruin your life. Alright, now guys, as you know, life is full of choices. We all have the right to make certain choices and decisions for ourselves. Now, regardless of whether you make good choices or bad choices, you must be accountable, okay, and be willing to face the consequences of the decisions you made. However, there are certain things that you can do that can potentially ruin your life or have long-lasting consequences. So, the fastest ways to ruin your life. That's what we'll be talking about in today's video. So let's dive straight into it. Now, guys, before we dive into these, okay, try and avoid making these mistakes. Alright? Now, I'm going to start off with the most casual and perhaps one of the most prevalent ones, just to get things started, and then we'll talk about some other potentially more serious ones. Okay? So, the fastest ways to ruin your life, things that can ruin your life. Let's dive into it right now. Now, the first thing that can ruin your life or have long-lasting consequences is holding grudges. Now, listen, if you've had a disagreement with another person, it's perfectly normal to feel offended, especially if you're the person who has been wronged. Okay, if somebody has done something wrong to you, it's normal to be offended, but there's always the option for reconciliation. You can find a way to kiss and make up. The two of you can reconcile. However, in some cases, okay, and this is your call, okay, I'm not the one to tell you whether or not you should do this, but in some cases, it might actually be better to cut that person out of your life. And it's sad, but I've heard cases where people have cut off family members, siblings, parents. It's sad, but it does happen. And in some rare instances, that is the correct thing to do. Regardless of whether you choose to reconcile with the person that you argued with or you cut ties with them completely, okay, regardless of which one you choose, I'm not judging you, but regardless of which one you choose, what you don't want to do is to go around bearing a grudge and living with the bitterness and resentment. Why? Because if you're bearing a grudge, okay, that means that you're living with anger and hatred and bitterness. And it's been scientifically shown that holding a grudge actually affects your mental and physical well-being. And it can actually lead to an increase in emotional anxiety and blood pressure. Okay? I think it was Nelson Mandela who once said that. He said something along the lines of how holding a grudge is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. And that is exactly true. Someone offended you many years ago and you're still bearing a grudge against that person. You haven't seen that person for a long time. They're not even in your life. But you're waking up every single day with all the bitterness and the resentment that you've had towards that person. The only person that's been affected is you. Alright? So, if you're someone who easily bears grudges, then this is an area of your life that you need to work on. Okay, you need to learn to forgive. Forgiveness simply means letting go of anger and resentment. That's all. Okay, you're making a decision to let go of the anger and resentment that you harbored toward the person that once offended you. However, it does not mean that you need to reconcile. You can forgive someone and never reconcile with them. Right? So forgiving someone doesn't mean that two of you have to be friends. Okay? It doesn't imply reconciliation. Forgiveness simply means letting go of all the anger and resentment. Okay? You do that primarily for yourself. Reconciliation means restoring the relationship back to the initial state before the offense was committed. Forgiveness does not mean reconciliation. If you forgive someone, okay, which is recommended, okay, because if you don't forgive, you're going to be living with grudges. Okay, so you should learn to forgive for your own emotional health. Okay, but that doesn't mean that you need to reconcile with the other person. In some cases, like I said, it's actually best just to cut ties with the other person permanently. But if you've chosen to do that, do not go around living with the hatred and the bitterness, because that will only destroy you and your soul. Alright? So just remember, this is the first thing that can destroy your life. Living with bitterness, okay? Holding grudges, not forgiving people. Guys, you have to learn how to do it. And depending on who you are, this is something that you might struggle with. Now, personally, I don't really have a problem with holding grudges. I can cut ties with certain people if I need to. I can say, hey, you know what? This person, I'm gonna sort of keep a distance from them. But bearing grudges hasn't really been a problem for me. But I know that there are certain individuals who really struggle with bearing grudges. Even people who are religious, alright? So even if you're a religious person watching this, it doesn't mean that this can't affect you. Okay? Remember, holding grudges is one of the most detrimental things that you can do to yourself, both for your emotions and for your soul. Guys, remember, learn to forgive. Okay? Learn to forgive. So that's the first thing that can destroy your life, holding grudges. Now, the second thing that can destroy your life is neglecting your health. They say that your health is your wealth, and I've heard that. I don't know who exactly said it, but it is sort of true. You can have all the money in the world. You can be like Elon Musk, but if you're terribly ill and you're having to spend a lot of money on healthcare, on medication, that's not great, okay? So it's important to take care of your health, and this will become even more crucial as you become older. Right? When you're young, it's easy to sort of neglect your health, and you might get away with it when you're quite young, but as you start to get older, okay, it will have more and more negative or noticeable effects in your life. So, neglecting your health. There are a lot of people, especially in developed countries, who consume a lot of, that could be like takeaway food, fizzy drinks, fruit juice, and listen, I'm not here to ruin anyone's party, but let's just talk about this, okay? If you're someone that regularly drinks fizzy drinks and fruit juice and things like that, you have to understand that one of the things that really causes people to put on weight, okay, isn't eating excessively. It's actually drinks, especially fizzy drinks and fruit juices. Okay, those things contain an excessive amount of calories and other things which just aren't great for your health. So if you're someone who's in the habit of drinking those things on a daily basis, fizzy drinks, squash, juices, okay, you're setting yourself up for really, really bad health in the future. Now, if you indulge in those things occasionally, like at a barbecue, at a party, or every now and then, that's fine. But doing that on a daily basis, consistently, is not good for your health. Okay, it's not great for your health. For me personally, my diet, I just like to drink water a lot of the time. Water and milk, especially in the morning. If I'm drinking fizzy drinks or fruit juice or squash, it's going to be maybe at a party or a gathering or some other event that doesn't normally occur on a daily basis. Alright? So guys, remember, fruit juice, fizzy drinks, they're not great for your health. The same applies to takeaway food. There's nothing wrong in going out with your partner, going out with your friends, buying food. There's nothing wrong with that if you're doing that occasionally. But if you're eating takeaway food on a consistent basis, that's not best for your health. You have to understand that takeaway food wasn't designed for your best health. It was designed for people who are typically on the go, and it was also designed to taste incredibly good so that you will keep on coming back for more. That's how they make their business, but it's not great for your health. So much like fizzy drinks and fruit juice, if you are indulging in this on a consistent, on a regular basis, or even worse, feeding all this stuff to your whole family, okay, you're not setting yourself up for good health in the future. And the effects will start to manifest when you get older. What do I suggest doing instead? Try and prepare your own meals. Learn how to cook. Now, it's going to take a lot of effort, especially in the beginning, and even more so if you don't have any experience cooking. But there is so much information out there on the internet. Okay, if you open up Google or even on YouTube, you can find tutorials teaching you how to prepare various meals. And the things that you need to do your cooking, you can get them in a lot of supermarkets, or you can buy it online if you prefer doing that. Now, you don't need to be the next Jamie Oliver or Lorraine Pascal. All you need to do is to learn how to prepare perhaps a handful of meals or dishes, things that you can cook up during the week when you have some spare time, or perhaps you can prepare it in advance or in the weekend. Okay, preparing your own meals is a much healthier alternative to eating out regularly. And one thing you'll observe is that you'll also save quite a bit of money. In fact, you'll save a lot of money. That's another added bonus of preparing your own meals. If you're a bachelor or spinster, so single lady or single guy, okay, learning how to cook now, okay, will be beneficial to you in the future. And even more so when you have your own family. Because you'll be able to feed your family and feed your kids on food that's a lot more nutritious and healthy than the food that you buy in a takeaway, or if you are ordering food all the time. Alright? So if you're not preparing your own food, okay, you're going to be having to buy food. It's not only going to cost you more money, but it's not going to be as good for your health. I strongly believe that learning how to cook and prepare your own meals is the healthiest option you have most of the time. And in addition, if you're the one actually preparing the food, you know exactly what's going into the food. And therefore, you can tailor your diet to be as healthy as possible. Alright? So those are two things that I just touched on regarding health. Fizzy drinks, squash, and also eating out. Now, there is like a third element or dimension that I want to talk on, and that is smoking, drugs, and alcohol. Now, I could go into these individually, but that's not really the purpose of this video, so I'm just going to sort of lump them together. Okay, so alcohol, drugs, and smoking. These are things that, no-brainer, they are detrimental to your health, and in some cases can result in disease or death. If you're someone who's a smoker, okay, and this is a very, very common example, there are a lot of people, including young people, who smoke. If you're someone who smokes, sure as hell, you know that smoking is bad for your health. And one of the reasons why a lot of people don't stop smoking is because it's addictive. So I'm a strong proponent of the idea that the best solution to smoking is to never get started. And that also applies to alcohol and drugs, okay? I've never smoked cigarettes in my life. I've never smoked cigarettes in my life, and I've never tried drugs, and I have no intention of doing so. That's really the best solution, to never get started. But if you've made the terrible mistake of getting involved in drugs, smoking, the good news is that you can stop, okay? You can stop. There's a lot of help out there for people who want to give up smoking. Now, it's not something that I've personally had to deal with, but if you're struggling with quitting smoking, okay, you really need to get help. You can get help from your doctor or your GP. You can go online and find online forums to help people quit smoking, and the same also applies to alcohol and drug addiction. Those are things that are guaranteed to damage your health. So, once again, you're someone who does drugs, you're an alcoholic, or you smoke excessively, okay, you need to kick the smoking to the curb. It will damage your health. And people who smoke spend a lot of money. They don't realize it, and you're not going to realize it until you stop smoking. How much money you spend every single week on cigarettes. It's an absolute waste of money, and you're damaging your health in the process. So you're someone who smokes and you're looking to quit. I strongly hope that this video or this section or this part of the video will encourage you to take the next step that you need to finally kick this nasty habit to the curb. Alright? Your life's a lot better off without smoking. Don't wait until you are 65 years old and you've been diagnosed with bronchitis or emphysema or lung disease or some terrible, incurable illness. And and wishing that you had listened to that guy's advice many years ago. Alright? The time to stop smoking is now. So, neglecting your health, that's the second thing that will ruin your life. Neglecting your health. Now, the third thing that's pretty much guaranteed to ruin your life, okay, for us bros, for us guys, okay, is getting the wrong girl pregnant. If you're a guy who's sleeping around recklessly, there's a very high chance, if you haven't done it already, there's a very high chance that you will eventually get the girl pregnant. Alright, that's the reality. Either you get a girl pregnant or she will baby trap you. Yes, such things do happen. Okay, she will baby trap you. She will basically set you up and basically trick you into getting her pregnant. Getting the wrong girl pregnant is one of the most destructive things that a man can do, especially if you are a young adult, like in your 20s or early 30s. Okay, it's one of the most destructive things that you can ever do. Because here's the thing, once you've had a child with someone, you are now permanently bound to that person by virtue of the fact that you now have a child. The two of you have created the baby, alright? So therefore, the two of you are now bound together by virtue of that baby. If you didn't plan on being with this person long term, or you didn't plan on marrying this person, you're now stuck with potentially the wrong girl, alright? Because she has your baby. She has your baby, and if you're the sort of guy that's just gonna sort of run away from her, abandon the child because you're not ready to be a dad, honestly, you have to be among the lowest of the low. Any man, okay, any half-decent man who has a conscience is gonna feel some sense of obligation to want to be part of the child's life, because that is your child. Alright, that is your child. So you have to be a really heartless guy if you get a girl pregnant and you don't want to take any responsibility. And sadly, there are men like that out there. So this is something that you have to be really, really careful of, getting the wrong girl pregnant. If you're not prepared to be a father, if you're not prepared to have kids as a man, then you shouldn't be having unprotected sex, okay? That's the truth. You should not be having unprotected sex if you're not prepared to be a father. And guys, don't listen to any girl who tells you that she's on the pill. If she tells you that she's on the pill, just assume she isn't, alright? I mean, it's a harsh world we live out there, but there are many men who have had to learn this the hard way. In the Western world, okay, like in Europe, America, or the UK, where I live, where I'm recording this from, okay, court systems are heavily in favor of women. This is especially true when it comes to divorce and child custody cases. So if you make the terrible mistake of getting the wrong girl pregnant, not only are you bound to her because she has your baby, okay, but it also has another consequence. Okay? Since she has your child, you could find yourself in a situation where you are now made to be financially responsible for the kid. There are a lot of selfish women out there who will deliberately, for instance, they will deliberately lie to a guy and tell him that she's on the pill. And this guy, being naive and foolish, will listen to her, and before he realizes, she tells him that she's pregnant with his child. Okay, let's fast forward about a year. The child is born, and she goes to put him on child support for the kid. Such things do happen. And if this happens to you as a young man, okay, if this happens to you as a young man, this will financially wreck your life. It's something that you want to avoid. Okay, you don't want to be having to pay for a kid that you never planned for and having to do that for the next 18 years. I've heard of guys who are having to pay child support for multiple kids. Okay, so getting the wrong girl pregnant is one of the worst things that you can ever do. But even if you don't find yourself having to financially support the child, if you're not in a position to start a family, if you're not ready to start a family, or you're not ready to have kids right now, okay, and this could be for a variety of reasons. You might have finished university and just trying to figure out your path. You might be trying to build a business. You might be planning to relocate, okay? Or whatever the reason is. If you're not ready to start a family, bringing a child will completely ruin your life. It's going to derail you from your path and your mission. If you were building a business and you foolishly got a girl pregnant, now there's a kid in your life, that's going to completely not only strip you of money, but it's going to completely sabotage your progress and derail you from what you're supposed to be doing. Alright? So getting the wrong girl pregnant is one of the biggest mistakes a young man can make. Once again, if you don't plan to have any children, okay, as a rule of thumb, do not go around having unprotected sex, and do not listen to any girl who tells you that she's on the pill. If she tells you that, just assume she isn't. Okay? You're gonna have kids. It needs to be at a time when you are ready to take on the responsibility of being a father. Okay? And ideally, you should either be married or in a committed relationship with a woman that you love. You both love each other, and you've both made the commitment to start a family. Okay? Remember, children are a forever thing. Okay? Once you've had kids, your life is never going to be the same. So it's important that you do this at the right time and you do it with the right person. Guys, don't get the wrong girl pregnant. It's one of the biggest mistakes you'll ever make. Okay? So that's the third thing that can ruin a man's life: getting the wrong girl pregnant. But this doesn't just apply to men. Okay? This also applies to women. Okay? If you're a girl watching this, and you are more than welcome. If you're a girl and you stumbled across my channel, that's great. Okay? If you are a girl, this also applies to you. Okay? You owe yourself the duty not to get pregnant by the wrong guy. Now, I've heard, you meet a lot of single mothers who are going to say, oh, he got me pregnant, my child's father, he was abusive, he didn't send me any money, he just ran off and left me. But what these women aren't doing is taking accountability for the fact that they chose the wrong type of guy to get them pregnant. Blaming your child's father for being a bumhead is not the answer. If you chose a bumhead and had his kid, that's your fault. So as a woman, it's your job not to get pregnant by the wrong guy. Getting pregnant by the wrong guy, or a guy who's just going to abandon you, will leave your life as a woman a complete mess. Because you're going to be raising that kid, or even worse, multiple kids, or even worse, multiple kids by multiple different guys. You're going to be raising them all by yourself. And you're going to be suffering. There are single mothers who are raising 2-3 kids by themselves, and they aren't even making over $3,000 a month. They are suffering, and they're bringing kids to the world to suffer with them. Don't do that. Okay? Kids should be reserved for long-term commitment and marriage, and you should give the gift of children to a man that truly loves you and wants to marry you. That's all I have to say. It applies to both men and women. If you're a man, getting the wrong girl pregnant will ruin your life. If you are a woman, allowing the wrong guy to get you pregnant will also put you in a problem. Alright? Now, the fourth thing, okay, this actually rolls me on to the fourth point, okay? So the fourth thing that can completely ruin your life is marrying the wrong person. One of the most important decisions that you ever have to make is the person that you choose as your life partner. Now, regardless of whether you want to get married or not, most people will eventually have a long-term partner. Unless you want to be single your entire life, most people will eventually have a long-term partner. Okay? That could be your wife or your husband, or if you choose not to get married and you're just living together, that's on you. Okay? But most people will have a long-term partner. Marrying the wrong person, choosing the wrong partner is one of the worst decisions you will ever make, and it's something that you really, really regret. I mean, they once did an anonymous survey on all people, okay, so people aged 65 and upwards. Now, I don't really consider 65 to be old. I consider that to be retirement age. Okay, so I'm just going to say people of retirement age and up. Okay, and the question they asked them was, what was the biggest regret that you have in your life? This was interesting. Now, there was a wide range of answers given, from people who said that the biggest regret in life was not being able to buy a house. Others said that the biggest regret was not having the chance to travel. Some said that the biggest regret was not taking enough risks when they were younger, like, for instance, not having the balls to start a business or take the risk needed to launch a company. or it could be an 85-year-old man who's looking back at that beautiful girl he once met 60 years ago when he was 25 years old. As a young man, he didn't have the confidence to approach her and talk to her, and he's looking back and he's regretting because he never met someone in his life who was that beautiful ever again. Okay, so there was a wide range of answers given. Some people even said that the biggest regret in life was not having kids. But do you know what the biggest and most painful regret of all? Think about it. The biggest and most painful regret of all: marrying the wrong person. Alright? So marrying the wrong person is something that, if you find yourself in that situation, okay, it's going to be extremely painful, and it's something that you will live to regret. So it's very, very important that when choosing a life partner, that we all take time. Okay, we all take time to vet out our partner and make sure that they are actually right for us. Now, before I go on, one of the reasons why a lot of people end up with the wrong person is having sex, and I'll explain why. Now, as humans, okay, we are naturally programmed to want intimacy and to want sex. That's normal. But one of the consequences of having sex before marriage, okay, is that it masks problems. Now, I understand that not everybody believes in not having sex before marriage, and if that's you, fine. That's absolutely fine. But even if you don't believe in not having sex before marriage, okay, having sex really early on in a relationship can lead you to be paired up with the wrong person. Because having sex masks problems. If you are sexually involved with another person, okay, you're going to be flooded with a lot of pleasure, okay? You're going to be having dopamine and endorphins and feel-good hormones coursing through your body, making you feel absolutely amazing. You're going to feel on top of the world. But here's the truth. While you're going through that emotional roller coaster and feeling absolutely amazing while having sex with your partner, okay, it prevents you from being able to spot problems. Yes, this is a fact, and a lot of people don't know this. Having sex masks problems. Okay? If you are having sex with your partner, it will prevent you from being able to see problems in the other person, being able to spot red flags, being able to identify problems in the relationship. It will prevent you from being able to identify or from being able to evaluate your true feelings. How do I feel about this person? Am I actually in love? Okay? And in addition, there's no need to really evaluate a relationship if you're having sex, because you're already having the greatest pleasure you can possibly have with that person. Okay? So you might as well just continue doing this forever, because you're having the greatest pleasure you could ever have in your life. So there's no need to evaluate this relationship and see if it's going anywhere. So this is one of the things that results in individuals getting married to the wrong person, which is having sex. Now, if you don't believe in not having sex before marriage, okay, if you don't believe in not having sex before marriage, at the very least, you should wait until you are in a committed relationship with your partner before becoming intimate. I think it's been shown that it's very common for people to be having sex on the third or fourth date. And to be honest, if you're having sex with someone that early on, okay, you're not going to have enough time to really vet out your partner. So if you've been having sex with your partner very, very early on in the relationship, don't be surprised if later on you realize that you're with the wrong person. Okay, and this is one of the top reasons why people end up unhappily married or divorced, or they realize that they're with the wrong person and they're saying to themselves, how did I end up in this mess? How did I end up married to the wrong guy? How did I end up with this monster? Yes, this is one of the reasons, okay? Having sex. So it's very important that you don't lead with your lust, okay? And instead, you should lead with your brain. You have to be able to control yourself, okay? Having sex is a beautiful thing, but it should be reserved for someone that you are in a committed relationship with. Now, I've basically shared my opinion. Some of you might disagree, and that's fine. We are all entitled to our own opinions, and if you want to drop comments down below on this topic, that's perfectly fine. But once again, I believe, and it's been shown, that having sex masks problems. Okay, and marrying the wrong person is one of the worst decisions that you will ever make. You will live to regret it, and you can prevent that by simply exercising a bit of self-control and making the commitment not to have sex or not to be intimate with your partner until both of you have made the commitment to be together long term. Okay, so starting to be intimate after nearly 9 months or a year is a lot better than ripping off your clothes after the date. Right? That's just my opinion. So this is the fourth thing that can ruin your life. Okay, marrying the wrong person. If you want to get married or settle down with someone long term, okay, so for instance, if you want to get married, I personally believe that you shouldn't even be thinking of marriage until you've known that person for at least 3 years. And before you finally tie the knot, the two of you should have been together for at least 4 to 5 years. That's just my opinion. Once again, you can disagree, and we are all entitled to our own opinion. But if it's going to be a lifelong commitment, I think sacrificing a few years to get to know the person really well is not really a big deal, because it's meant to be a lifelong commitment. And even if you aren't actually walking down the aisle, if you want a long-term partner, I believe that you should, once again, invest a couple of years into getting to know that person. And one of the things that will really help you to be able to evaluate the relationship and spot red flags is refraining from sex and refraining from intimacy. Now, here's the thing. A lot of people don't do that. And you know why? Because it's hard. It is hard. Controlling your primal urges, your desire for sex and intimacy is hard. It is flipping hard. Okay? It's not easy. Okay? And which is why most people aren't going to do it. But you can be better than most people. Okay? You can take this advice, you can run with it. Now that you know that sex masks problems, it doesn't make sense to be having sex with someone on a third date. At least not if you're looking for a long-term spouse. That should be reserved for after both of you have made the commitment to be in a committed relationship or exclusive. Alright? So that's the fourth thing that can really ruin and screw up your life. Marrying the wrong person. I hope it doesn't happen to any of you. Alright? Now, the fifth and last thing that can ruin your life is committing crime or getting involved in crime. Now, why is this? Well, once you commit a crime, okay, you now have a criminal record. And it doesn't have to be a serious or grievous crime. If you've committed any crime at all, like you're charged with stealing or some kind of fraud, if you've been prosecuted and convicted of a crime, you now have a criminal record. And that's going to stay with you. I understand that different countries have different laws, but here in the UK, we have a very well-regulated justice system. And if you commit a crime, and this usually applies to most countries, if you commit a crime, you're going to have a criminal record, and that's going to have far-reaching consequences. Okay? It could affect you your entire life. Depending on the nature of the crime, it could prevent you, your criminal record, your criminal past, could prevent you from being able to get certain jobs or hold certain positions in the future. Alright, so being involved or committing a crime is something that you want to avoid at all costs, regardless of where you live. And once again, different countries have different laws. Regardless of where you live, make sure you respect the laws of your country. Make sure you obey the laws, even if you don't agree with them. Okay? Obey the laws of your country. On the other hand, if you commit a crime that's serious, you could find yourself not only prosecuted but facing a long or super long prison term. In some parts of the world, now we haven't got this here in the UK, but in some parts of the world, you might even find yourself facing capital punishment. Now, speaking of capital punishment, I'm totally against capital punishment and the death penalty. But there are countries around the world that have the death penalty. And I know that in many states in the US and also in countries like Japan and China, okay, the death penalty is an option for serious crimes. Now, so guys, one of the things that can ruin your life is committing a crime or even getting a criminal record. Okay, you want to make sure that you don't get on the wrong side of the law. And this applies whether you are living at home or you travel abroad. Okay? You have to obey the laws of the land. Even if you travel, you must obey the laws of the land. Okay, now earlier this year, I heard on the news about how 4 Canadians, so Canadian citizens living in China, they were executed for drug crimes. Okay? Now, it might seem horrific, and I certainly don't agree with the idea that someone should be put to death and completely destroyed and put in the grave for committing drug crimes. But these 4 guys were caught selling drugs, large amount of drugs, and they were sentenced to death in China and finally put to death. Now, even though there was a lot of backlash and condemnation of China's decision to have those 4 men put to death, the point is that different countries have different laws. So, if you decide to travel somewhere else, you have to obey the law of that land. If you're at home, you should also obey the law of the country you're in. Those men, even though they were Canadian citizens, they were living in China. And if you've moved to another country, you have to respect the laws of that land. So those men should have respected Chinese laws and Chinese customs. Getting involved with drug crimes in China is a bad idea, because you could find yourself facing capital punishment. That's not the case here in the UK or in Canada, but in somewhere like China, you could find yourself facing the death penalty. And those guys learned the hard way, which is why they're no longer with us. They're no longer alive. They're no longer alive. And if you've never heard of it, I've included the link in the description, basically giving information about this incident. Absolutely horrific, but it goes on to show how committing a crime can have very, very serious consequences. So guys, that's the 5th and last thing that could ruin your life, which is committing crimes. Don't get on the wrong side of the law. Make sure you obey the law wherever you're living or wherever you travel to. No one is above the law. Respect the law at all times, even if you don't agree with it. So guys, that's it. Those are the 5 things that can easily ruin your life. Fastest, surest ways to ruin your life or cause problems for yourself long term. So let's have a quick recap. So the first thing is holding grudges. Holding grudges will only destroy your own emotional and spiritual well-being. Don't do it. If you've had a disagreement with someone, forgive them. Regardless of whether you choose to reconcile or you cut them off, you don't want to be living with anger and resentment. Make sure you forgive for your own sake so that you can move on. The second thing is neglecting your health. Rather than buying ready-made food and drinking fizzy drinks and squash and fruit juice, learn to prepare your own food. Learn to prepare your own food. Learn how to cook. There's a lot of information, and thanks to the internet, you can learn how to do almost anything. You can learn to cook almost anything. You just need to know how to cook a handful of different dishes, different meals, and not only will you save a lot of money, but it's going to be a lot healthier than eating out all the time. The third thing that will ruin your life is getting the wrong girl pregnant. Now, I've said enough about this. Guys, be careful, Protect your seed, Don't go sleeping around recklessly. Getting the wrong girl pregnant will ruin your life, especially if you are a young adult and you are living in the Western world. Getting the wrong girl pregnant will ruin your life. The fourth thing that will ruin your life, marrying the wrong person. It's very important, if you're not yet married, that you take time to carefully choose and vet out a prospective partner, to assist you in that. Try and avoid getting intimate too soon. It's your call, but there are consequences to everything. If you're going to choose a life partner, you should be with that person and spend at least a few years getting to know them really, really well. And above all, trust your gut instinct. If you feel that something isn't right, just hold back, You shouldn't be getting married if you have any doubt. So trust your gut instinct and trust in God as well. Now, the 5th and last thing that could ruin your life is getting a criminal record. honestly, you shouldn't commit any crime at all. Okay? If you commit a crime, even a crime that's not very serious, you're going to have a criminal record, and that could affect you later in your life. Okay? Make sure you respect and obey the law, regardless of whether you're living in your home country or you're living abroad. Okay? Always obey the law. So guys, if you found this useful, do consider subscribing for more. Give this video a like, and feel free to share this with anybody else who might find it useful. Thank you very much.